Okay, so this is my video on Where the Wild Things Are. Story time. I'm filming this right now at about 1 a.m. and I watched the movie at 2 or 3 p.m. yesterday. I wrote it. I wrote what I was going to do, and then I went off to work, came back, and now I'm doing it. And I was going to do a little bit at the beginning of the video where just for like 10 seconds I listen to the music for a bit and I say, how can you get to the review when this music? But it turns out that bit was a little bit too real, because 10 seconds turned into 5.5 minutes, and then 5.5 minutes turned into a 12-minute take of me trying to start my review. And I couldn't start my review because even just the music, it took me back to that place that I experienced this afternoon. And it was a really profound thing that happened to me. This is a change of pace for my channel. I'm usually a lot more funny than this. I don't usually break it down as much as I am right now. I'm being 100% real right now. I had an experience with this movie. It affected me on a profound level. And as I'm sitting here right now, this movie has a 6.8 rating on IMDb, has a 71 Metascore. And I'm not saying that critical reaction is all that matters, but I just don't get it. I think to say it's underrated is an understatement. So I decided to do a video of 5 reasons why you should love Where the Wild Things Are. Like, I'm a unique person and all, but I just can't imagine living in a world where I'm the only person that is profoundly affected by this movie. Okay, so let's get started.
Number 1.
Reason number 1 to love Where the Wild Things Are is something that I kind of talked about earlier in the review. The score is perfect. There's nothing wrong with the score. What can I even say about it? It's perfect. It fits. It's beautiful. And this is important, I think, to talk about because the trend in movies still is to score the movie with a big orchestra and classical music and all that stuff. And I think that's great, and I think it works great for some films. But it seems to be the status quo that every film does the big orchestra. And this movie does what sounds like an indie band or something. And I get that most people don't have the same taste in music as me. And I'm not saying this just because I like the particular brand of music that was in the movie, but that kind of music fit the movie. So sometimes I'll often think, why won't this movie have a rock and roll score? Why isn't this movie scored by just a guitar? Why isn't this movie just a piano? Why isn't this movie scored in a way that is particular and right for the movie? And Where the Wild Things Are is, I'm not going to say one of the few, because I've seen a lot of movies that do what I am saying that I want to happen. Listen to me, that I want to happen. Sound like a boss. I'm just an audience member. But Where the Wild Things Are is innovative enough to give us music that is different but fits. And it's perfect. It's a perfect score. It's scored by Karen O, partly, who was the lead singer of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And she also scored a bit of Her, the other Spike Jonze movie. Okay, moving on.
Number 2.
Reason number 2 to love Where the Wild Things Are is that it's just a marvel to look at and to feel. It feels completely natural and completely true. The world that is happening in Where the Wild Things Are is true. The cinematography is near perfect. The exterior shooting of the movie, that's how you do exterior scenes, because it all looks and feels so good. This is worth mentioning. It is true that Spike Jonze, the director of the movie, was offered to do a completely animated treatment of the story, which, if you're thinking about it, makes a lot of sense, but he opted not to because it's a human story. And then he made it feel completely real with the effects and the production value. Oh my god, this movie is so good. If you don't believe me by now, it's not just a children's movie. It's an incredible movie. Okay, moving on.
Number 3.
Reason number 3 to love this movie is that it has a really good child performance. How many movies can you really say, this movie has an incredible performance by the lead actor who is a child? Maybe The Sixth Sense, maybe E.T., some of you might say Harry Potter. This performance is legitimately good. The actor's name is Max Records, plays Max. His performance is completely realistic, convincing, emotionally resonant. What else to say? It works. I think he has this really great every kid kind of quality to him. And not just every kid, kind of like every person. Me sitting here as a 19-year-old, I understand that I'm not that far removed from being a minor myself. But I sat there and I was just relating so much to what he was going through. And it's so cool that this movie stars a child performer who is able to communicate his childlike issues, but also his human issues in such a mature way. It's so rare.
Number 4.
Reason number 4 that you should love this movie is Spike Jonze. Spike Jonze is probably my favorite director. I'm not saying that you should like him because I like him, but I'm saying that I like him because his movies are completely beautifully inventive and creative and unpredictable. But still, every one of his movies is emotionally resonant as freaking shit. Holy crap. I'm getting worked up talking about this movie. I'm getting a little bit frustrated because I'm so happy. God, Spike Jonze, he makes such good movies. If you haven't watched Being John Malkovich, he directed that. It's amazing. If you haven't watched Adaptation, he directed that. It's amazing. If you haven't watched Her, he directed that. It's almost a perfect movie. And if you haven't watched Where the Wild Things Are, why the hell not? Because I've been sitting here for like half an hour telling you to. This video works if one person decides, you know what, I'm going to watch Where the Wild Things Are, maybe in the next few days. If that happens, I'm good, and I can consider myself a disciple of Spike Jonze, which is my lifelong dream. I'm promoting your movie, Spike, because it's beautiful. I just love that he took this so seriously. He stood up for this movie. The studio was like, what the hell are you doing? This is a kid's movie. Stop making it so serious. And he's like, no, it's not. It's a human movie. I'm going to make this movie. He stood up for it and made what he made. And it was great. It's such a beautiful study of perspective. Because of course the story is like this spirit quest of Max running away and kind of being in his own head and figuring out how he wants to behave and the person he wants to be and how he deals with his emotions and coming to terms with just himself as a person. Oh God, it's a beautiful story. Of course it's that. Of course it's going on in his mind. Of course it's not real. But Spike Jonze presents it as being real because the story is told through Max's perspective. The audience can figure out that it's not real. And that's important because Spike Jonze is so smart that he knows that perspective and doesn't spoon feed the information to the audience. I feel like so many movies today, with a slight even inkling of a confusing premise, just show the audience, don't worry, this is what's happening, here's a flashback, or here's a cutaway shot that explains everything. Where the Wild Things Are just lets you in to Max's character.
Number 5.
And the 5th reason that I came up with that you should love Where the Wild Things Are is because it is a movie about childhood, not a children's movie. Think about it. How many movies have you seen that are legitimately mature studies of childhood and not children's movies? So I mean something like Boyhood, as opposed to Alexander and the Horrible, Terrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I think that's actually the title for that movie. I remembered that title. Good for Jake. Like, thinking about it, the only other one that I can really think of is Boyhood. Or to a lesser degree, those movies that I talked about earlier with the child performances. This movie is childhood. It's sad a lot of the time. It's angry a lot of the time. It's alone a lot of the time. It's happy some of the time. Taking a break from being sarcastic, Jake, for a second, this movie is correct. Childhood is like that. Life is like that. And I just haven't seen many movies that are just as immeasurably true as this one is. You guys know that I've seen a lot of movies. I've seen at least over 400, 500 movies in my life. Not a lot of movies have been as emotionally touching as Where the Wild Things Are. It pains me to admit it, but Where the Wild Things Are isn't a perfect movie. It has some flaws, but it's very, 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 very good. Yeah, you might find it to be a little bit cheesy at times, but have a heart. Have a heart. I'm sorry, that was a little bit rude. I'm not suggesting that you don't have a heart. I don't know what else there is to say about Where the Wild Things Are, because it's so good. Watch Where the Wild Things Are, the movie from 2009, because it's underrated. Where the Wild Things Are gets a 9 out of 10. I really do sincerely apologize for not being very funny in this video. I usually try to be funny, to give people something to kind of be entertained by if they're not entertained by the reviewing of the movie or they're not interested by the movie. I guess I just took that away this time because you need to be interested in this movie. It's possible that my experience was maybe a little bit subjective to me, but I'm saying that it's possible that it's maybe a little bit subjective. Just a little bit. Because regardless of my life or my story or things that have happened to me, this movie is still so good. I need to stop talking about this movie because if I keep talking about how great this movie is, I'm just going to combust out of love for Spike Jonze. If you like this video, click like, click subscribe, and for God's sakes, please watch Where the Wild Things Are.